All right. Thank you. Thank you for stopping by, everybody. This is Angelo Santana, and I'm bringing you Santana Money. And today we're going to talk about what is money. Today is Thursday, June 13th, 2024, and we are looking at the US debt clock. Right now we are at 34 trillion 819 billion 51 million 400 and thousand something changes, just going up. I can't even keep track. This is out of hand. This is unsustainable. I'm not exactly sure how this is going up so fast, why we're giving up all this money and sending it all over the world. But I'm hearing a lot of people talk about the economy, the national debt, the economy falling, taxes, and this is one of the reasons why I'm making this video. But before we get into that, I just want to let you know that I am not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. So please do your own research. I am just a general person here on the interwebs sharing my perspective on generational wealth, money, and the economy. But with that said, let's get right into it. I'm going to show you a whiteboard by Patty Hirsch who describes fiat money. A lot of people are not aware of what they're going to work for and the check that they make and what you deposit into your bank and what you put into your wallet and what you use at the grocery store, at the gas station. Those dollars are fiat money. Those are fiat dollars. Let's get into it so you can know exactly what that is.
Hi, it's Paddy Hirsch at Marketplace. So when you hear the word fiat in conversation, you might think, ooh, nice little Italian car. Well, when it comes to money, I'm sorry, but nice little Italian cars are not what we're thinking of. So where does the word fiat come from? Well, back in the day, if you took a dollar and walked into a bank a long time ago, you used to be able to get a certain amount of gold for that dollar because a dollar was worth a certain amount of gold. Of course, if you tried that today in the United States, you'd get laughed out of the bank. And the reason is because a dollar is what's, like most currencies, is what's called a fiat currency or fiat money. So what does that word fiat actually mean? Well, it comes from the Latin, let it be done. So if you're familiar with the phrase royal fiat is when the king or the queen, someone in power, decides that they want to do something. They do something by royal fiat. So the king might say, I want everyone's gold in the entire realm, let it be done. And because he's the king, everybody does it. That's kind of what happened in the United States whenever the government decided to take the gold standard away from the dollar. So it actually decoupled the value of a dollar from the value of gold. And then the government said, this is worth a dollar's worth of goods and services backed by the United States government. So it's not really worth the paper that's written on, it's only worth what somebody else is prepared to give you in return for that dollar. That's really all it is. So because it's not backed by gold and silver, this is great news for the government, because the government can now go out and crank out as many of these as it needs to fund a war or to bail out a bank or whatever. It's great news. It's actually pretty good news for us as individuals because it means that now that our currency isn't tied to the value of a commodity like gold or silver, it means it's not going to be quite so volatile as it has been in the past. The bad news, of course, is that if the government prints lots and lots of those dollars, vast amounts of money goes into the system, it means you've got more dollars chasing fewer goods and services, and that can lead to inflation, where the value of your dollar is worth a lot less. And of course, that can also lead to hyperinflation, where the value of your dollar just falls off a cliff because there's just so many dollars chasing so few goods and services. And when that happens, it could leave us very badly needing a drink.
Now there you go, ladies and gentlemen. He gives a very great explanation of what fiat money is. And then he also goes into supply and demand and how that causes inflation when we print too much money, which is kind of like what we're going through. He briefly discusses also in regards to the gold standard. A lot of people are not aware of what this is. And what I want to show you right now is exactly when this happened and exactly what was said. Let's check it out.
In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States. Now, what does this action which is very technical, what does it mean for you? Let me lay to rest the bugaboo of what is called devaluation. If you want to buy a foreign car or take a trip abroad, market conditions may cause your dollar to buy slightly less. But if you are among the overwhelming majority of Americans who buy American-made products in America, your dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today. The effect of this action, in other words, will be to stabilize the dollar. Now, this action will not win us any friends among the international money traders. But our primary concern is with...
Now, I'm not going to show you the rest of the video. You can go into the description and click on the link to watch the whole thing. But you can pretty much see the vague explanation protecting the U.S. dollar. Do you think that this was a pivotal role in the economy, in the global economy? Do you think this is fair to all the other countries in the world that had a gold-based system and then had to change? This led up to the creation of the U.S. Petro Dollar, where the United States after this told Saudi Arabia they had to sell all of their oil to anybody else in the world in U.S. dollars so that our dollar was still needed throughout the world. I'll make another video about that because there's a lot more to it. But for the most part, let me know down below. Do you think that this is fair? Do you think that this is something that we needed to do? Or whatever it is. But if you think that is crazy, wait till you see the next part of this video. All right, everybody, let's go to the next part of our video where Cold Fusion brings us how is money created. Now, this one's pretty long, but I'm going to be breaking it up so that this way you can get the best nuggets of information. Here we go.
For thousands of years, gold was the measuring stick of value. Gold was kind of like a physical anchor, keeping the money supply in check and governments responsible. In 1971, President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed value. Since that point, money, the measuring stick of value, has become elastic. Since the US dollar backs all other currencies as a reserve currency, Nixon's decision changed the world. In all of this, you might still notice that despite politicians supposedly not being able to influence money creation, it's happening anyway.
Yeah, it's like politicians do whatever they want, and then they don't have any consequences for it. But let's go into the next part of our video where it talks about how the banks are left with a profit. Let's go.
The vast amount of money created today is done by the private banking sector. In most developed economies, about 97% of the entire money supply is created digitally by banks, and therefore most money in the world is privatized. Banks invented digital money when they managed to persuade lawmakers after many early bank runs. A bank run is an event where depositors try to get their money out all at once, but the banks don't have it. From these events, banks argued that they should be legally allowed to create more deposits than actually exist based upon debt. And this is how governments outsourced the creation of digital money. The idea of using debt as money begins much earlier than this. English innovators set the stage for banks to become the creators of money across the globe. In 1704, the English Parliament passed the Promissory Notes Act. Take a good look at your screen. What you are seeing is a promissory note. In this case, it's a written promise to say that you'll pay back the $20 you borrowed. Under the law, this piece of paper was as good as $20. Today, we digitize this agreement and call it debt. If it helps, whenever I say debt in this episode, you can think of this piece of paper, remembering that it's as good as money. Okay, so banks were authorized to be able to use these debt notes to circulate as money. From this point, banks were free to create and destroy debt, and hence money from themselves rented out at interest. In the modern world, as you'll see, the whole world's economy is based upon these promises. Let's take a look at how it works today. When you go to a bank to borrow some money, the banking license gives that bank the ability to create money every time they issue a loan. They do this through the double accounting system. For example, if you buy a $500,000 house, the bank creates $500,000 in their account and you have $500,000 in debt. That is, the promise to pay it back with interest. This $500,000 debt can enter the wider economic system because when you purchase the house, the owner of that house can use that fresh debt that was created by the bank that they received from you to buy other things in the economy. This means in our current system, if we want to have more growth, we need more debt. The key point here is that debt is actually money, just from a different point of view. To the lender, it's an asset of money, and to the borrower, it's a liability of debt. But they are one and the same. It sounds a bit complicated, but all you need to know is that when a bank issues a loan, it's not somebody else's savings. It's not money that the bank had. It's essentially brand new money that they create. They simply type it into a computer and it appears as a digital representation of the government's money which you can spend. The beneficiary of this brand new money is actually the bank because they get to charge interest on that money, and that's how they make a profit. Later, when you repay this loan, the debt disappears and the money also disappears, but the bank's profit from the interest remains.
Bam, and there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's how the banks make their money. They just type it in the computer, they lend it to you, and you pay it back with interest. But
It's 3 o'clock.
what happens when you take your money and deposit it into the bank? Let's go.
So that's loans. But what about deposits? When you deposit cash into a bank, you are no longer the legal owner of that money. The banks are. They keep 10% of your deposits on reserve and can loan out 90% of that money to someone else. And that other person can deposit that money into another bank, and then that bank can loan out 90%, and so on. This is known as fractional reserve lending.
If they say, we'll transfer it to your account, that's wrong, because no money is transferred at all. Because what we call a deposit is simply the bank's record of its debt to the public. Now it also owes you money, and its record of the money it owes you is what you think you're getting as money, and that's all it is.
When all is said and done, an initial deposit of $100 with a 10% reserve requirement can ultimately lead to $1,000 in total money circulation. Well, at least that was how it used to work. Until March the 26th, 2020, there is now a 0% reserve requirement. According to the Federal Reserve, quote, "This action eliminated reserve requirements for all depository institutions."
I'm not sure if anybody remembers what was going on in 2020, but this was passed and not a lot of people were aware that the banks do not need to keep your money in the bank legally. Let's keep going.
End quote. So, banks can now create infinite amounts of money with no reserves. And it doesn't stop there.
So how can a bank create infinite amount of money with no reserve, go bankrupt? I'm sorry. Sometimes I just don't understand. If you understand, please leave a comment down below and explain this to me. But if not, let's just carry on.
When banks hold your deposit, they can, along with hedge funds, gamble with it through investment in financial instruments such as derivatives and securities. They do this in order to make superior returns. Most of the time, these instruments are basically just bets on if the price of an asset will rise or fall. But when taken to the extreme, it can get ridiculous. Remember in my Enron video how I talked about how they use financial instruments to bet on the weather? These crazy classes of financial instruments is what brought down the housing market and the subsequent global economy in 2008. But the problem today is that banks are playing with so many derivatives, sometimes stacked on top of each other, with leverage multiplying factors, that nobody actually knows how much money is tied up in this gambling. Some estimates put the derivative market at over $1 quadrillion, over 10 times the global economy.
What? I don't even know how many zeros are in quadrillion. Let's go. Now, this is out of hand. I'm at a loss of words. And if you are, please leave a comment down below. But let's get to the last part of this video, which is kind of disbelieving also. Here we go.
It's important to note that governments don't actually support the people. It's the people that support governments through taxation. Taxation and trade are the two major ways that governments can raise money. This raised money is used to pay back the central bank loans with interest. So when governments use the central banks to bail out private banks for their risky behavior, the governments are left with the debt, which eventually has to be paid back by the taxpayers in the future. So to recap, private banks create the vast majority of money, about 97% of it, and they do so by creating loans, which is debt. The process is as simple as typing numbers into a computer. Banks can, to an extent, spend and gamble consumer deposits as they legally own it. Too big to fail banks are backed up by the central bank, creating a moral hazard. And that brings us to the final and most insane form of money creation: central bank digital money. The third form of money is quantitative easing, or QE. Quantitative easing is a new form of money that was invented by the Japanese central bank in 1989. It was later popularized by the Federal Reserve in the United States during the 2008 crisis. QE is where a central bank creates money in order to issue loans directly to the banking sector, large corporations, and most recently, the public. It's a way of flooding money into the economy at times of extreme events like the financial crisis of 2008. As a result of this, the central bank's balance sheets have gone completely out of control in order to prop up the economy a little bit longer. In 2008, during the crisis, and the first time this was tried outside of Japan, the $700 billion bailout of QE was very controversial.
Bailing out Wall Street is the only way to save Main Street, so says the president.
The house of cards was
about to fall. Sorry, I digress. Let's continue.
much bigger. Started to stretch beyond just Wall Street.
That's how the president defended one of the largest proposed financial rescue plans in U.S. history. Treasury Department and congressional staffers are working through the weekend, hammering out the details. The president's plan would allow the Treasury to buy up to $700 billion worth of bad loans, like many of those subprime mortgage deals. But those bad debts then go on the American public's tab. Congress will have to raise the legal limit on the national debt from $10.6 trillion to $11.3 trillion.
Now, what does that $11.3 trillion look like when you look at a national debt of $34 trillion and some change? I'm sorry, I digressed again. Let's continue.
It was thought to be a one-off emergency scenario, but over the next decade, the Federal Reserve was unable to reverse it. To give you an idea of how significant all of this was, it took from the foundation of America in 1776 all the way up to 2008 for the nation to attain less than $1 trillion in debt.
So in 200 years, we raised $1 trillion in debt. And since then, we're at 34 trillion and counting. We're not doing too bad, guys. Let's keep going.
2014, that number had expanded to 4.4 trillion. And since the onset of the COVID pandemic, 3 trillion was added in the span of 3 months. Now, the US central bank is creating hundreds of billions of dollars in mere hours. It's seeming to have less of an effect as it continues.
We have a lot of good faith based on the prowess of the U.S. printing press. I mean, the United States maintains reserve currency status.
That's fake money, though. That's not real money. That's fake money. That's $200 trillion of fake money.
Oh, you're really? I know. But it's all based on faith.
How long is this sustainable, though,
Wow.
to go at that pace? The argument then becomes about the taxpayer who's pissed off and saying, let me get this straight. You can constantly bail yourself out and you can constantly go print money with this quantitative easing. Why the hell do I have to pay taxes? Why do I pay taxes?
These are the seeds of social unrest in this country. You can only drive so big of a wedge between the haves and the have-nots especially when you're gutting out the middle class in the process. The Federal Reserve monetizing the U.S. debt is what enables all of this.
So how does this money enter the system? Central banks use their magic money to buy the equivalent amount of bonds from the government. They do this through the bond market, which exists to lend money to corporations or governments. Although the stock market gets more press, the bond market is actually bigger. So what is a bond? For the purposes of this video, it's basically the same as debt but is issued by a government or corporation. Central banks, which have no savings, can create money to buy these bonds. So here's an important question. Can a central bank go bankrupt? Well, according to the European Central Bank, which published a paper in 2016, central banks are protected from insolvency due to their ability to create more money. If you think this sounds a bit unfair, just wait. Governments in our current situation are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can't raise money except for raising taxes, but owe trillions to central banks.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop this right here because this video has gone on a little bit too long, but I did give you the gist of everything. Please, let's take this opportunity to let you know I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please do your own research. Please leave me a comment down below so that this way we know exactly what you got from this video. Hopefully, I left you better than when you got here. Thank you for coming by. Please leave a message, like, comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends and family. That's going to help the YouTube algorithm get this video out to everybody. Thank you for coming by. You have a great day.